So, two things.
What page are we?
We are on page 18, so lesson 2b, the 10 Commandments, the second table of the law.
Fourth Commandment, right?
Yep. The two things that I was reminded of this morning from previous times that we talked, when we're talking about adiaphora, the things that are optional, and I was trying to explain how it's the propers largely and how that works, chanting versus not chanting that we consider adiaphora. For explaining that, the other article of Augsburg Confession, which I couldn't remember at the time, it's Article 24, specifically paragraphs 1 through 3 for the internet, and if you want to look that up later. And then the other thing was, for the First Commandment, images and icons. We don't take the First Commandment as banning images and icons. There were, at various times throughout Christendom's history, these things called the iconoclastic controversies. And iconoclastic means against the icons. So for a time, the East was actually against icons, and there was a big debate in the church about whether or not it is appropriate for the church to be making, through usually like painting or mosaics, images of angels and saints and God himself. And ultimately the church came to the conclusion that God himself instructs Israel to make images of the seraphim to put on the tabernacle and then in the walls of the temple in Jerusalem. So yeah, we are allowed to do that too. More recent argument from Pastor Brian Wolfmueller is God became man. He made himself an image, and therefore it would be wrong of us not also to depict him in imagery for the sake of learning, not for the sake of worship. A recent argument that I heard from, this would be early 1600s, I think it is, that the Lutherans of Germany were making for this is, if we go to the book of Daniel, in Daniel, God the Father is actually depicted as an old man. So once again, we have an example of God depicting himself in a way that we can picture and understand, which then means that we can also do this within reason. And if we look at the command in this, I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other false gods before me. What is the specific rule that is being given for images and icons in there? It's things that we are to worship, things that pull away our worship and our faith from the true God to something else. If you use it as a means of teaching, like the icons and the images that we got in the house here, then it is good, it's right, and it is salutary. But when you're worshiping these images, or when you're taking the totems of the saints and you're treating them as if they do something for you, if you do something for them, then that becomes idolatry.
Well, that's one thing I did like about, I think it was in here under the large catechism, where it said, I should get my own copy.
Is this under the Ten Commandments section?
Yes, it was, I think, towards the end of the First Commandment. Yeah, it was talking about, you like quit asking God for things and asking God for things and being like, do this for me, do this for me, do this for me, because then you're basically acting like you're the God and he's an idol.
Oh yeah. The divine vending machine. That's how that is spoken.
He's not a jinn.
Yeah. He's not the one who answers wishes for you. He has been fairly clear about his interaction with us, what he expects of us, and what he wants us to ask for. And for that, all we have to do is go to the Lord's Prayer and see in that most of the things that we're to ask for. And then there are many other examples throughout the rest of the Bible. But yeah, it's a good observation that I forgot was in there.
trying to find it, figure out where it was, but yeah, it was somewhere in the First Commandment of this.
Well, so those were the things that I forgot to bring up, or could not remember the location of last time. Did you have any questions from last time? All right, then let's get straight to the second table of the law. This long quote. This is a series of theses that Luther was working on for a conference or colloquy. I don't remember what they called it back then. So it is manifest that in the second table of the law, it is taught that we seek and get possession of all things, since it says, "You shall not steal." That is, your own things you may have. You may not have what is not your own. Or, just as Paul says, let him work so that he may have something to give to the one in need, from Ephesians 4:28. So before we move on to thesis number 6, that's thesis 4 and 5. What Luther is saying here is that when we look at the commandments of the second table of the law, it's not only admonitions of not do this, not do that, or in the case of parents, do this. It is also telling us that private property is expected, that labor for wages is expected. These are actually commanded to us. If to use a modern controversy that's going on right now, if buying isn't owning, piracy isn't stealing. This is the video game controversy, of course. And what the commandments are saying is, you have to have things. God has given you things to own. Everybody is given things to own, given things to work for. But you're not allowed to steal from one another. And stealing is impossible if private property is also impossible. Adultery, for instance, is impossible if marriage is not possible. Home ownership must be possible because the ban against taking somebody's home is there. And then Paul himself used to seek by work of the hands such support, and he used to possess his own things. Thus, while he forbids adultery, he compels us to have our own wives, as Paul says. Let everyone have his own wife in 1 Corinthians 7:2. So we have the example of Paul himself. What was he doing during his missionary travels? He was a tent maker, and he made his what he needed as money to pay the way, so that he wouldn't be a burden on the local churches, which at that point would have largely been built up of the poor and those who were of the lowest scale of wages. It is certain, however, because Christ had not come to undo the law of the second table, but rather to uphold it. Yea, indeed, the magistrate and laws of the state he upholds everywhere, even face to face with Pilate, saying, "It was given to you from above," in John 19:11. So I should probably actually go back to 1 Corinthians 7:2. This is not saying that God has required of everyone that he be married, but he does say that we can get married by this. It's not saying that because God has allowed us to have possession and says that we should have possessions, that doesn't mean that somebody can't become a hermit without any possessions. God has also allowed for that. If you really don't want to be involved in economics or anything like that, that is within your power. Good luck feeding yourself. And then we see, of course, Christ himself also upholding this from the quote in John 19. Christ speaks about forsaking and selling all things on account of the first table, or on account of confession and the public means of faith. For in the case of the first table, for that very gem of the kingdom of heaven to be retained and bought, by which he means the pearl of great price, or the treasure in the field, a field must be sold. All other possessions must be forsaken and disposed of. But then, before we get to that one, when it comes to salvation, when it comes to the matters of the first table of the law, worshiping God alone, bearing his name correctly, and honoring the Sabbath day, our possessions, our wife, our family, our homes, all of these things, even our reputation, are expendable. They are to be spent for the sake of the first table of the law. So if the government or a thief comes to you and desires to take from you your second table rights, then because of the first table, because you are Christian, then Luther is saying, here that you are obligated to be willing to give them up for the sake of retaining your faith. For then, because in the second table you justly have and possess all things for this life, you will cheerfully dispose of it on account of the first table, that is, eternal life. So, when eternal life is on the line, things of this life, things of the temporary nature, like this entire house, they are unimportant. They are easily given away because our eternal future is secure. Outside the case of the first table or of confession, we are to prepare, keep, defend, and manage all things, because we are expected to obey the second table, that is, with divine and with natural justice, to protect the body and this life, to support, to guard, and to manage it. So we should draw a distinction also between confession and the second table. Do you two know what he means by, for the sake of confession, the second table rights must be given up? No? That's all right. I don't remember what the Latin is for confession in here. But it's in the case of martyrdom, essentially. In the case of persecution coming in, so he's thinking of Rome coming in, conquering Germany, and saying, you must now submit to the Pope, or we're going to take all of your home, your family, everything. And so Luther says, when it comes to a moment of confession, when the gospel is on the line, when a false teacher is demanding of you false teaching as well, you must rather give up your life, your property, and your family than break that. You must confess the truth, even if it costs you all of your earthly goods. So the defense of both the first table rights and confession override the right to the second table. Make sense? Okay. Outside the case of the first table or of confession, if someone does not provide for his own people, he denies the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So, if you have family in need, and it would be keeping the first table of the law to support them, then you are supposed to support them. If you do not support them, then you cannot possibly be keeping the first table of the law. Now, if you have family in need and somehow or other it's a breaking of the second table of the law, then you don't have to support them. I don't know what a situation like that would be, but that's the logic here that Luther is bringing up. And Christ says, "Let man not separate those whom God has joined together," in Matthew 19:6. And by this he means not just husband and wife, but also man and dog, man and house, man and property, all of these different categories. That is, thus by relinquishing his own people and by selling his own possessions. Likewise, besides the second table, he sins also against the first. Okay. So God has given you your house, your home, your animals, your wife, your family, and you have no right to separate yourself from them. And no one else has any right to separate you from them without just cause. To do so would be to break not just the second table of the law, but also the first table of the law, because God has, after a fashion, attached himself to your possession of your property. Now, for the sake of this house, no one has the right of separating myself or Janelle from it, except the bank. And the bank only can do that if I don't pay the mortgage on time. Does that make sense? All right. Thus, on the other side, whoever for the sake of God has not spoken to himself, his own people, and his own things, I do not know you. He keeps neither the law of the first table nor the second. So this is in reference to Jesus' teaching. Whoever does not hate father, mother, brother, sister, husband, wife for my sake and for the sake of the gospel does not love me. That's what Luther's talking about here. To value these people higher than God is to treat them really like an idol and to break the first table and the second table of the law. Because one, you're not obeying the first commandment by having only one God, and you're not obeying the fourth commandment by honoring your father and your mother. You are dishonoring them by, for all intents and purposes, worshiping them. Does that make sense? Vincent, does that make sense?
silence.
He's too fascinated by how tall you are. So it's an interesting bunch of theses in which at some point he calls the Pope like a bear dog, which is like some German insult.
Okay.
It's fun. As far as I'm aware, it's not actually published anywhere, though. I've got a copy of the Latin translation. A friend of mine has a copy of the German translation that he made. If you ever want to see the whole thing, let me know. So let's move on to the Fourth Commandment. Honor your father and your mother. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. So Luther, he takes this one to be referring not just to mom and dad, but he is also equating the legitimate rulers of the world outside your front door as filling those positions as well. So the logic behind that is the father, he is the king of the household. All the fathers in the city are kings of their own households. But for the sake of commerce between the households, they delegate some of their fatherly authority to a government entity. And the government then becomes the father of the local town. And then that government with the next town, they form together their own higher government, which is the government of the county, then the government of the state, then the government of the country. And dear God, please never the government of the world. That'd be terrible. But each higher order of the politics is taking its authority from the rung down back toward the house until it ultimately winds up at the feet of the father of the individual house. So all then officials outside the door are like a father to you and are due honor and obligation that one owes a father according to the authority that has been delegated. That's roughly the idea that we've got going on here. And as far as I'm aware, that's how Luther and a lot of the reformers thought of government. It's, of course, far more complicated than that. But Donald Trump, he is, for all intents and purposes, the father of the nation.
Oh, don't let him know that.
Yeah. But this is not like founder of the nation, but the final stop for authority. Like the Supreme Court, they also fill that a part of that role. Congress and the Senate also do, but they're doing a terrible job of it. The commandment requires obedience to authority, to parents and other authorities as God's earthly representatives. Proverbs 23:22. Forgot to grab my Bible. You got that one? I'll take the next one.
Oh no, don't play with that. Don't play with that.
Let's see if you hit that.
Don't. That was on me.
22.
Yep.
Okay,
Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old.
And there are a number of other places that we could go, such as Paul saying that the ruler does not bear the sword in vain. Honor whom honor is due, respect whom respect is due, elsewhere in the New Testament. But unless there are questions about the Fourth Commandment, we can move on to the Fifth. All right. You shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. So note that this isn't just you shall not go out there and stab him in the back intentionally. But this also has to do with the physical well-being of your neighbor. If you see your neighbor in need and you have the means of helping him, then not helping him would be the same in your heart as murdering him. So think of what, and I think we, perhaps not, but in one of the Gospels, Jesus talks about how if you look at your brother with hatred, you have murdered him in your heart. It's a similar idea, but this is more a sin of omission rather than a sin of commission that Jesus is talking about, if you understand the difference between the two. Good. Okay, so the Fifth Commandment forbids us to take the life of another person, murder, abortion, euthanasia, or our own suicide. But note, this is not talking about killing, but we'll get to that in a bit. So Ezekiel 18:4, I've got that. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. So this is God talking about humanity. He's claiming ownership of every single human being. So if a human being takes the life of another human being, you're actually stealing from God. You're breaking his ownership of somebody. You're taking that person from him, which has all sorts of implications. So when I say this is not talking about killing somebody, this goes to the meaning of the Hebrew word that we have here and the Greek equivalent in the Septuagint. I don't remember the Hebrew word, but I think the Greek is something like phoneo. It starts with the phi letter in the Greek alphabet, and it is used for murder. For evidence of this, all you have to do is you have to go to the old court cases from Athens and see the defenses against the charges of murder, and it's that word that they use. So there's a Greek author, Lysias, who wrote a whole bunch of legal arguments, and one of them is like against Eratosthenes, I think it's called, where he's defending Eratosthenes from the charge of having murdered his slave, and it's the exact same word as the Septuagint uses. And we also know that this commandment is not talking about general killing, because God all the time is commanding general killing to take place. When the soldier goes out and he kills his enemy, that's not a violation of the Fifth Commandment. It's actually a keeping of the Fourth Commandment, and it's a keeping of the Fifth Commandment, if the war is godly. For that's a lot deeper and more difficult conversation, and you have to go to Augustine and Aquinas and take a look at just war theory to really judge them. Or you only keep to what the wars we see in the Bible and see whether or not God has commanded them and how he treats them. So when David goes out there to fight the Philistines, when they kill the Philistines, man, woman, or child, they're not committing murder. They are doing God's will and eliminating the sinners and the enemies of Israel. When David goes out to war against the Ammonites or any of the surrounding nations, he's not murdering anybody. He's defending his own people. He's actually protecting the life and the goods of his own country. Does that make sense? Well, then when you go after somebody without justification and you take his life, it is murder. So, when we get to it, would you take Job 10, 9 through 12? Janelle, would you take Psalm 22, 9 through 10? And then we'll get Proverbs 31, 8 when we get there. Okay. The unborn are persons in the sight of God from the time of conception. Since abortion takes the life of a human being, it is not a moral option except to prevent the death of another person, that being the mother. So Job 10, 9 through 12.
Remember that you have made me like clay, and will return me to the dust. Did you not pour me out like milk, and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh, and knit me together, bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love.
And then Psalm 22, 9 through 10. Thumbs up.
But you are he who took me out of the womb. You made me trust while on my mother's breasts. I was cast upon you from birth, from my mother's womb. You have been my God.
So there's also one of the prophets who talks about how God has known him from in the womb. So with the Job reading and the Psalm reading that we have here, we see that God counts life in the womb as still belonging to him. And then God also counts at birth and following birth as life belonging to him. So Job would tell us that the killing of a baby is murder. And then whoever wrote Psalm 20, that's David. David in Psalm 22 is telling us that killing a child as he's being born or after birth is also murder, as it is throughout all of life. Then the severely handicapped, infirm, helpless, and aged are persons in the sight of God with life given by Him and to be ended only by Him. So you have Proverbs 31, verse 8. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. And there are a lot of such places where God speaks of sympathy for the handicapped. Pardon?
You need help. You need help.
Any questions about those two categories?
Not at all.
All right. Then would you take next 2 Corinthians 1? Janelle, would you get Romans 12, 19, and 13, 4? And I will take 1 John 3:15 when we get to them. Our own lives are a gift from God and are to be ended only by Him. Even great suffering has its own purpose in our lives, in that through it we become more Christ-like. Pain avoidance at all cost is not the Christian way. So that's 2 Corinthians 1, 5 through 7.
For as we share abundantly in Christ's suffering, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort too. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. And if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same suffering that we suffer. Our hope for you is unshaken, for we know that you share in our suffering. You will also share in our comfort.
So, Paul here is not talking specifically about like the suffering of the terminally ill. And yet this verse will still apply to that. The suffering that Paul is enduring is actually bringing him closer to Christ, because Christ also suffered. So we can think of Jesus fasting for 40 days in the wilderness before he begins the ministry with the apostles. And then relate that to our own fasting in Lent. We usually fast during Lent for the 40 days because Jesus did, so that we may be joined to him in that part of his suffering. But then all suffering, all persecution, all pain, he has also experienced. And so when we suffer as Christians, we know that's actually joining us closer to Christ's own suffering. And then we have a further degree in what suffering does for us, and that's the vocation of sufferer and the vocation of comforter. When somebody is terminally ill in the hospital, he cannot do anything for himself, and yet what does he provide to the local Christians? He provides the means for them to show love to one in need, in extraordinary circumstances. So what should a Christian do when another one is in the hospital? Go and visit him. He can do nothing for you, and yet just by existing, he is doing all sorts of good for you, by permitting you the opportunity to go visit the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame, the dying, and do him good, bring him the comfort of fellow Christians. And this is a very good work that he does for you. It's a passive work, and yet God is pleased by it, which undoes all of the claims toward euthanasia, that euthanasia is compassion. Now, euthanasia is cruel. It's cruel to the community, and it's cruel to the sufferer, because what the sufferer should be receiving is sympathy, is love, is an outpouring of generosity and companionship from the community. When you take him away, you rob both the man the happiness of his final days, and the community the learning about death and the happiness of serving one in need. God forbids us to hurt or harm our neighbor physically. Only the government has the right to execute judgment. So Janelle, that's Romans 12:19.
Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine; I will repay," says the Lord.
And part of why he's saying this is because he's the only one who knows what is actually due in its fullness. So when we go out to seek vengeance from somebody, we always overreact. We always extract more justice than we are actually due. And so we create a negative on the grand budget sheet of justice, as it were. And then the person that we have acted vengeance against is owed vengeance against us, and it's never ending, and we wind up with nothing but a big mess. We wind up with the Hatfields and the McCoys. So when somebody wrongs you, what is your recourse? Well, God has given us the government that we are to appeal to the government for justice. And the government is supposed to give us justice as well as the government can. And if the government doesn't even do that, then guess what? One day the government will be held responsible. The people in government will be held responsible by God. So in the end, we will receive justice. This is actually an interesting argument for the laws of the universe demanding the existence of the afterlife. Because justice is not received in this life. It has to be received in the next life. But that's unrelated.
Why does justice need to be served /
This goes back to an ancient philosophical idea about the virtues and the understanding of justice. Justice is, in the ancient mind, actually kind of a neutral existence. It's a neutral state.
Okay.
If you are perfectly just, then you are perfectly even in all things. When somebody wrongs you, justice has been taken from you and now you are uneven. The equation on the data sheet is off and you have to balance the budget to return to true justice. So you are owed justice from the one who wrongs you. And it's not reasonable for that law of the universe in the ancient mind to be at an unequal number at the end of time. You can't enter the afterlife and have your justice budget sheet in the red.
That's very interesting. Because the concepts like that aren't modern concepts. Because we've done away with.
Yeah, we've abandoned that idea. Stupidly.
Spirituality and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we look at the character of God, he calls himself just. And if we look at how the Bible talks about justice, it's very much, it looks like Adam's here, in line with this idea that the ancient Greeks had. So God's own concept of justice demands that the balance sheet be put fully in the black, that there be no red. And so he is the one who will balance it. We are not given to balance that, unless we are the designated servants of justice to God.
How did they, okay, this might be a big tangent, but how did they come up with the idea that justice, like, philosophy is hard.
Go on.
But, like,
How did they come up with this concept of justice, that it is essentially a positive good that you possess and can be stolen from you?
well, like, how did they come up with the fact, like, the universe has to fix, like, justices and injustices?
Well, it's not the universe that has to fix it, it's God who has to fix it.
Oh, yeah.
Even the pagans believe that.
Really?
It's, like I said, it has to do with the nature of God. Like, even the Greeks understood that the gods themselves had a concept of justice, which meant that in the afterlife for man, justice had to be equaled out.
Did everybody just believe in higher powers?
All right, how about you? Not too bad. We're right in the middle of the Fifth Commandment.
Okay.
You can go in the fridge.
We're talking about ancient philosophy.
One of my favorite.
It's not even
These are still warm. I made garlic knots. I took a stab at making
Awesome.
garlic knots.
You want to stick these over by the stove.
Yeah,
They are fresh out of the oven. So,
wonderful.
hey, I'm
Let's
Adam.
hope they
Adam, I'm
stay
Carter.
warm.
Carter, gonna meet you, Carter. Too.
All right. So,
So, okay, did everybody just believe that there were higher power?
I don't think we can say that at any time consciously everybody believed, because there's always been some form of an atheist, even though
Really?
subconsciously the atheist does believe that there is a God. God himself says this. But universally believing that the gods have a concept of justice, again, I don't think we can say that. I don't know enough about the pantheons of the Far East. The pantheons of the Far East really seem to be too
They're
contrary to reason.
different mindset.
Yeah.
Because the Easterns, they Yeah, they just have a completely different culture and
Yeah, their
completely
idea
different
of,
base that
of
they're working off of.
moral absolutes is wonky, whereas the Greeks, they did have a concept of that, which meant that they had a closer to accurate concept of justice. But where they originate this, I don't remember. You'd have to read.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
I should get around to
Very good book.
Oh, yeah.
Highly recommend.
I should get around to reading.
Yeah.
I did a world history class in 2017 in college, and that was one of the books we were supposed to read. I didn't, but we're supposed to.
You missed out. It is a very good one, especially for understanding virtue.
I'm surprised it was on the reading list though. From college.
Right.
College, like, oh, you're supposed to read this. I thought they didn't like stuff like that.
No, glossed over it, I think, maybe. Wasn't exactly.
Unsurprising, because Alistair McIntyre and After Virtue kind of, if you follow the line of reasoning for his argument about virtue, it's just shreds modernism. It's just a horrible plague on the human soul. I don't know if that's was his intent, but that's the effect. But
It's a very good effect.
we should move on. Where were
Sorry about my tangents.
we? It's all right.
After aromas.
I didn't read
Romans-
Harming physically and only God.
Yeah. So
I didn't read
Romans 13:4. If you want to follow along, we're on page 19.
Yeah, totally.
For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, and an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil.
So this is the government that Paul's talking about. We already spoke about this.
He's talking about the government.
Yes, and we should note that at the time of writing, Nero was emperor. But this is not Nero gone mad. This is Nero while he's still fairly normal for a Roman emperor. There's been a very long debate in Reformation circles, both the Calvinists and the Lutherans, and probably also the Zwinglies. No, of course, yeah, they did it too. About the right of resistance. That's not really anything that we have time to go into, and it's very, very deep and very long and very difficult. And then all the solutions that the different people come to are not 100% certain. But if you look up Dr. McKinsey, professor at Fort Wayne Seminary, I think he did a presentation once on issues, etc., dealing with this. He teaches a whole class, and that's 10 weeks, meeting 2 or 3 times a week, and it's a very difficult thing to answer. So we're not going to do that today. God forbids us to harbor anger in our hearts against our neighbor, so that's 1 John 3:15. Somewhere on here. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has an eternal life abiding in him. So this again goes back to what Jesus himself says: if you hate your brother in your heart, you have murdered him in your heart. And how can then John say that if you hate your brother, then you cannot have God in you? Because God is love. And as the passages that we've already talked about, God claims ownership of all human beings. So if we hate somebody else that God owns, then we hate, through virtue of that, God having owned him and created him, we hate God, which means we cannot love God. We cannot be unified with him. Now, is it true that God hates people? Yes. He himself says that he does this. But why does he hate people? Always when he's speaking about those whom he hates, it's those who have rejected his word, are even twisting his word and trying to destroy the souls of the people that he owns. All right, Carter, would you get Romans 12:20? Janelle, would you get Proverbs 23? Oh, sorry, that's a long one. I'll take Proverbs 23. Would you look up instead Ephesians 5:22 through 33?
Ephesians 5?
Yeah,
Oh, that's on
when we get to it. All right. Adam, do you want to join in the scripture reading?
Oh, I could hear you guys.
No, I mean, do you want to read into passages as we go?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, I'll help, yeah.
Do we have another Bible around here, Janelle?
There's my Bible in my room, but it's ESV. Of course, I'm probably the odd one out. I'm using New King James.
You're in King James, aren't you?
Yeah.
ESV is a good translation. It's the standard one that we use.
Well,
That's what I have.
I'm saying I'm the odd one out. I'm not using ESV right now. I'm using my new.
Oh,
King
you
James.
heretic! No.
But I can go get my ESV.
Yes, please.
Okay. Here, let me bookmark that.
Well, while you're gone, God requires that we help and support our neighbor in every bodily need. So that's Romans 12:20. Two giants, I know. It's scary.
To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head.
So, note that Paul here is saying enemy. And if we're to do this for our enemy, then most definitely we are to do this for our neighbor and the ones who are closer to us.
Or which one do you want? Do you want the study Bible or the King James?
Well, it don't matter to me now.
Doesn't matter?
Yeah. I'm sure they all say the same thing roughly.
They do. It's just, well, this is mine from
You
when
start
I
getting into the
got
now.
confirmed.
Right. Where would you like me to flip to?
It's almost a decade old.
So would you take Genesis 1, 27 and 31 when we get down there? All right. We should avoid and assist our neighbor in avoiding the abuse of drugs and use of any substance that harms the body and mind. So that's Proverbs 23, 29 through 35, which is me. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who tarry long over wine, and those who go to try mixed wine. Do not look at wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup and goes down smoothly. In the end it bites like a serpent and stings like an adder. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart utter perverse things. You will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, like one who lies on the top of a mast. They struck me, you will say, but I was not hurt. They beat me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake? I must have another drink. So, we are to help our neighbors not be the man of Proverbs chapter 23. That's also part of keeping the Fifth Commandment. Now, I don't know why I don't have this in here yet, but the self-defense argument. Does the Fifth Commandment permit us to defend our own bodies? I'm getting a nod from Adam. I'm getting utter uncertainty from Carter. I'm getting baby noises from Janelle.
Well, I have a baby, so...
So, you missed the reading that we had at the very beginning of this second table, where Luther, there's a whole bunch of theses that Luther has on the difference between the functions of the first and second tables of the law as regards private property. And he speaks about how when it comes to keeping the first table of the law, we are obligated by God to surrender life, home, wife, everything, so that we cannot defend ourselves. But when it comes to the matters of the second table of the law, we are obligated by God to maintain our ownership of property, our possession of wife, home, animals, and so on. Which then implies that we are required, when it is not a matter of keeping the first, second, or third commandment, or a matter of confession in time of persecution, we are obligated to use violence to defend what we possess. Now, in those theses, I don't remember Luther specifically saying, but this has been not universally, but largely held by the church, that when it comes to the defense of your family, of your property, you can use violence and take a life, depending on state laws, of course, so long as it doesn't involve breaking the first commandment. So, yes, self-defense is biblical. Sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we lead a sexually pure and decent life in what we say and do, and husband and wife love and honor each other. It is worth noting that Luther's explanation focuses only on the good and the positive side of the commandment. Why does he do this? In part because we have the command in the New Testament that we are not to speak of salacious things. So Luther is avoiding that, and he's also following the positive nature of how it was. God gives us a command around parents. When it comes to marriage and family, we want to focus on the positive attributes of this and not think on the negative. With the command from the New Testament, this also has to do with not even allowing the wicked thoughts in our own minds. The sexual sins are far more insidious than most sins for most people. So the positive aspects. We should praise and encourage holy marriage among our children, teach them correctly moral conduct in reference to human sexuality. We should realize that the relationship between husband and wife is to be an earthly reflection of the relationship between Christ and his bride, the church. So Janelle, that's you with Ephesians 5:22 through 33. And then Adam, you've got Genesis 1 coming up.
Yes, sir.
Carter, you've got Mark 10, and then I've got Hebrews 13. So when you're ready.
Okay. 33. Okay. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So there, Paul lays out enough of the argument that I don't think I need to delve further into that. Let's move on to the next one. So what is God requiring in this commandment? It requires us to consider sexuality a pure and good gift of God. And if you're familiar at all with the purity culture of like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s from parts of American evangelicalism, what has been the result of that? Sexuality issues have actually worsened in the church and in the country, in part because of that. Because they were...
Really?
Well, yeah, the churches were so focused on keeping the marriage bed pure that they stopped talking about it altogether. They stopped talking about marriage, they stopped talking about sex. They sheltered children so much that when they went to college, they were shocked by all of these things and then drawn into them because they had no defenses against the temptations to sexual sin.
I remember that now. Now that you say all that, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a pious idea that resulted in the destruction of the faith of a ton of people and is continuing to do so. It had the further problem of because people weren't talking about marriage, about sexuality to their kids in appropriate ways, that the kids didn't wind up wanting to get married, and then they didn't get married.
Oh.
Or if they did, they didn't want children. Or if they did have children, they had few.
So bad.
A whole bunch of problems.
All bad problems.
Yeah. So, Genesis 1:27 and 31, please.
Entire chapter?
Just those two verses.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Now it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he could not see.
It should be Genesis chapter 1.
Oh, Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. Worst mistakes have been made in these classes.
Yes. By me.
Do you know when you take Titus 2?
I felt like I was way far ahead.
Titus?
Okay, so God created man in his own image. In the image he created him. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish in the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And I do have a question about that my last pastor could not answer.
Okay.
If we have a little bit of time.
Sure.
And then 31. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day.
Okay.
Okay. My question is, when did God create Eve from the rib?
Presumably on the 6th day.
That's my question. Because I thought it was in chapter 2.
Genesis chapter 1 is the general creation story where we get the overview of all 7 days.
Okay.
And then Genesis chapter 2 is the particular focusing on the creation of man. And that takes place on the 6th day.
Okay.
And then Genesis chapter 3 is probably the 7th day.
I see. What would have me confused, because I've read chapters 1 through 7 of Genesis back and forward a million times. I find it so interesting. Is that there's using plurals, because we know that God created Adam from dust, breathed life into him, and all that. But it says them, male and female. He created them, and there's plurals before chapter 2 where it talks about Eve, and that always confused me because I felt that everything is written purposefully with reason and chronologically. So I wasn't sure, because there's that whole theory about the pre-Adamic races and all that.
Oh yeah.
And
silly nonsense.
Yeah.
Silly nonsense.
That always confused me.
Yeah, if we take a look at how chapter 1 operates, we see God works until the 6th day, and then it says explicitly, he rests on the 7th, which means Eve had to have been made on the 6th day, according to the grammar of this, which means chapter 2 has to be the 6th day, unless God lets Adam rest as well on the 7th day, and he goes and he names all of the animals on day 1 of week 2. The Bible's not really entirely clear on that at all, but for him to wait that long doesn't make much sense to my mind. My reason denies it.
It says, male and female on the 6th day.
Yeah.
Right.
Those words are kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
And that's what always just had me confused. And then God, looks down and says it is not good for man to be alone. So then, puts Adam into a deep sleep, all that good stuff. And that just always confused me, because why is that in 2 and not 1?
Because of the importance of it.
Okay.
So creation of day 1 through 5, that's very important. But it's nowhere near as important as marriage itself, because of the passage that Janelle just read. Because marriage is the goal of humanity, the union of Christ and his church, which begins at the cross and isn't fully consummated until Judgment Day. And then we really do dwell one with God. So the creation of the world is important. But it's far more important that God show us what marriage is, so that we will understand what he is striving for throughout the whole rest of the Bible. That God and man be one. Does that make sense to you as well?
That part, yeah.
Alright.
And, if they gotta keep ideas together, so creation is one chapter and then marriage is another.
I suppose.
Right? Okay. That's just...
Creation also happens in chapter 2.
Really?
But then we could also say that creation happens in chapter 3.
Oh.
because we had the conception of Cain and... that's 4. Cain and Abel in 4. And Seth.
That makes sense. That 2 is just a microscopic view of what happened with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll shut up. They don't know anything.
Yeah. But let's move on. All right, where are we? God requires us to honor marriage as God's institution, the lifelong union of one man and one woman. So that's Mark 10. Is that you, Carter?
That is me.
Okay.
But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate.
So we've already talked a little bit about that which is joined together should not be separated, because God himself is, after a fashion, connected himself to it. But in the case of marriage, God is genuinely connecting himself to this, at least the Christian marriages. We can be sure of it, because when God joins two Christians together, then he joins them as an image of Christ in the church. He has put he's put his own name in the stakes of that marriage. All right. God requires us to reserve sexual intercourse for the marriage partner alone. So that's Hebrews 13:4. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. Now for this one, we do have to pause for a moment, because there is judgment spoken. And whenever judgment is spoken, we have to ask, is judgment final? I'm getting a nod. Getting
Are we talking face. Judgment Day or like...
Right. Judgment for a sin, not Judgment Day, capital J.
You're okay. What?
What's the question?
What the question is.
So when we have this judgment that the sexually immoral will be judged, is that a final thing where once it is done, there is no recourse?
Oh, well, I would think if you're... I'm sorry, Carter, go ahead.
Would it depend?
Well, I would think if you've repented, you could baptized, and you've accepted Christ, and...
Yes.
We're going to sin till the day we die, no matter what.
Yeah, that is all true, and exactly what I'm looking for here. When the Bible speaks of the finality of judgment for sin that is committed, we only have two instances of that. One which is the infamous sin against the Holy Spirit, which is really denial of the work of the Holy Spirit in saving people. And then the other one is an obstinate and continuous sin, like the sin of Saul or the sin of Pharaoh, where the man continually rejects the opportunity for repentance, and eventually God says, very well, then thy will be done. So even when it comes to this, Hebrews is being very, very stark. If you are a sexual sinner, you will be judged, just like Romans chapter 1 talks of. But what does Romans also tell us? What does Hebrews also tell us? That Christ was sent to save sinners, so that even those who have committed this or any other sin, there is forgiveness, if there is also repentance and faith. So whenever that comes up, we also always need to be thinking of that. What's the recourse for humanity? And it goes straight back to the gospel. And if you don't go back to the gospel, then it is genuinely final. Then we do wind up with a capital J, Judgment Day. All right. God requires us to control our sexual passions and desires, Titus 2:11 through 12.
Oh, that's me. 11 and 12. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Yes, that's it.
Okay. So, I don't think I need to say any more than what Paul says there, unless questions, comments, or anything that we've covered so far. Nope. Janelle, question.
What?
First, what time is it? And how long do you need to make the fettuccine?
Probably about an hour.
That's how long you need?
Oh my gosh, it's 5 o'clock already? That's why I'm hungry.
Here, why don't you pass me the baby, and you can go ahead and get started on that, so our guests do not themselves starve. He also needs to eat. Here, hand him to me, and we'll give him a bottle.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Okay, you're gonna have to sit on this side. Sorry.
Well, I gotta cut the meat and cut the luncheon.
You got time.
Oh wait, you bought those bags, didn't you?
Bags?
Oh, Parmesan.
Oh yeah. So that part will be easy. All right. Carter, would you you take Matthew 19. Adam, will you take 1 Corinthians 7? And then I will get Romans.
Can I ask a quick question about marriage?
Mm-hmm.
So I have 2 under my belt, but I grew up, was baptized as baby Catholic. My family was Catholic. We left the church, went to one of those Southern Baptist, like, PowerPoint of a lady walking through Wheatfield type churches. And so I guess I could have considered myself Christian, but definitely in the lukewarm range.
Mm-hmm.
Up until I was maybe 30, I couldn't tell you one verse from the Bible other than John 3:16, which everybody knows. But I did get married at 19 and then again at 25, and I've been divorced twice. And I've been wondering to myself, am I ever allowed to be married again according to the church?
That does depend on the circumstances of the divorce.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to be going through these 2 passages. It is a very touchy subject. It's very difficult to deal with, especially for people who have gone through that.
I could say biblically it's not. The reasons we divorced, it was more of like, it just we wouldn't stop fighting and arguing and all that kind of stuff, and that's why it had nothing to do with death or walking away or anything like that.
Then you should not.
I should not, okay.
The way that God talks about it is he considers the marriage lifelong. And then the allowances are the 2 that we're about to get into, and there really are only the 2. Sexual infidelity and then desertion, whether that be desertion by actual abandonment or by violent abandonment, as it were, where rather than rendering the duties that are due husband to wife, wife to husband, they are refused, and violence is also involved. So like spousal abuse, it's very much on the line there. But insofar as that is abandoning the duties that one spouse owes the other, that is kind of a keeping, kind of falls under the category that Paul gives us in Corinthians. But God himself, he absolutely hates divorce. The normal verse that people use to show that from Micah actually doesn't say that, but as we look at how he treats it all throughout the rest of the Bible, it is an evil in his eyes. So unless the woman that you were married to dies or marries another,
They're both remarried.
then that might change matters, but
I'm not in a rush to ever get married again. I don't even consider it, to be honest with you, but
that is best.
okay.
It is when we're not quite certain where we stand in regards to this thing, the best solution is the one that Paul says it is better to remain unmarried. And frankly, for anybody who gets divorced, it's probably the better answer. Not going to be for everybody. For some people, it is not wise to remain unmarried. And if marriage is possible and marriage is biblically legal, then that may be something that is worth being considered. It's a bit rough. I've met quite a few men who were abandoned, in some cases maliciously. And one of them is married again. The others, either I haven't heard of any change, or it's not likely to happen. And for them, it's best, biblically speaking, just not to marry again. To take the free time given to you now, where you don't have energy devoted to a spouse, and devote it to the sake of church, the sake of spiritual growth, something like that. To answer at all the question.
Oh yeah, well, kind of like you said, it is kind of I know people bat that around, volley that around sometimes, because I've asked pastors that, and they've said, some have said yes, because Paul says it, if you can't control these urges, it's better
to marry, yeah, he did say that.
And they've used that, but I don't know. I don't know. In my heart, I don't know if it's yes or no. I am still unsure, and I just want to ask again.
Again, best no. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what will actually be.
Just want to do it right.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to
that
be
should
Big
always be our
J.
goal. Now, question. We record these. Do you want that whole section chopped out of the recording?
If it helps somebody, then go for it.
Okay. So I don't want to share personal information,
That's fine.
personal details, unless it's okay.
Oh, perfectly fine.
Carter, are you okay with us keeping the fact that you're a giant in the recording?
I don't know if I'm the largest one in here now.
Oh, you got, what are you, I'm 6'4", what are you, 6'6"?
Yeah, I'm right at 6'4".
All right, okay, all right.
Yeah. All we need is my brother here, and then I will genuinely feel small.
Oh, I'm short in my family. You should see my cousin Craig, 7 foot even.
What?
Yeah, he's a Nephilim baby.
I have a cousin.
You get
He's like, you haven't met him,
I haven't met him.
unfortunately. He is like 6'7", 6'8", maybe he might be taller than that. I'm kind of quite curious to see how tall his son is. His wife's, she's about your height. Becky might even be smaller than that.
Well, you get to.
Well said. I know the Bible says don't comment, but does it say anything about envy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
covet and envy are the same thing.
Well, now you get to see what it's like for me.
Well, it's not that
I'm a
big of difference.
tiny person, and now you are too.
You are, for all intents and purposes, a little human baby child.
As people ask me all the time, they're like, "What's it be like being 6'4", 6'5"? I was like, "Wish I was taller."
Okay.
I'd give you 2 inches for a head of hair, so. I'm fine being 6'2" with hair.
Yeah. With every advantage, there's typically a biological disadvantage. So for Asians, they're really great at math, but they're terrible at beards.
Right.
I don't know why God made that choice. All right, let's continue. So God forbids divorce except in the case of marital unfaithfulness. So this would be the category of adultery and desertion. So Matthew 19, 6-9.
So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? He said to them, Because of your hardness of heart, Moses allows you to divorce your wives. For from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery.
So, if you want to hear a more in-depth analysis of this passage and the other passages around divorce, Dr. Benjamin Mays is doing a series, again on issues, etc., on divorce. And I think the first 2 parts are out from this last week. And he talked about this passage and the standard that Jesus is using, the historical background behind even the question that they're asking him. And then he'll also get into Paul, as it were, broadening the definition of divorce for us in 1 Corinthians 7:15. Adam, if you would get that one.
Yes, sir. But if the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace.
So that one, I think, he is in the part 2, which I haven't listened to yet, where he'll get a little bit more into that. But generally, how this one is taken is if the other spouse acts the unchristian and abandons the vows even without sexual infidelity, then the Christian is free. The ideal, though, that Paul will talk about in Corinthians around this verse is that if the non-believer in the marriage is content to live with the Christian, then the Christian absolutely must live with the non-Christian. But if the unbeliever will abandon the Christian, then the Christian is set free from this. And then Paul talks about how if you burn with passion, it is better to marry. But This is me speaking and not the Lord. It's better to remain unmarried. Period.
And that's where my question actually comes from. Because like I said, I kind of like went to church a little bit as a kid and growing up, but you could not rightfully, or I could not rightfully call myself a believing Christian until probably 4 or 5 years ago. I said I was because in the Southeast everybody is, right? We all just say we are, but the path is narrow, and I was not on that narrow path. Definitely lukewarm, if even warm at all. And so that's kind of like where my question was I actually a genuine Christian when I got married? No, I wasn't. I don't believe I was, even though I was baptized as a baby in the Catholic Church. I went to church a handful of times as a kid. I firmly believe had I passed away in my youth, in my 20s or whatever, I'd straight to hell. Absolutely. Especially with who I was back then, absolutely. So that's kind of where my question was with it. I'm sorry if I'm taking your time.
No, it's all right. We don't, and as far as I'm aware, the Bible doesn't really either draw a distinction between Christian marriage and pagan marriage. We know that the pagans always treat marriage just unbelievably loosely. For the Romans, divorce was the simplest thing ever. You just basically said, I hate you, and you leave, and marriage is over. We even have instances of them trading wives. Marriage was almost a thing that didn't exist. You had Augustus Caesar trying to solve this problem by putting it into act laws to protect marriage, and yet it still didn't work. The paganism would not leave the pagans, and he could not save it. And so there were all sorts of horrible problems. But the Jews, it was not much better. Like we have Moses brought up in this, and it's the Jews were, at least as far as Luther's concerned, and I don't know how right he is about this, the Jews were very litigious about marriage, and they sought all sorts of means to get rid of their spouses for the sake of others. We can think David and Bathsheba. What does he do in order to get his hands on Bathsheba? He has Uriah murdered. Now that was not a big thing in Jesus' day as far as any records I've heard.
Well, now, didn't Solomon have like 400 wives?
700.
700. Ooh.
700 wives, 300 concubines. Have we got food working too now?
Yeah.
Yeah, would you?
I don't think I know 700 people.
Swipe on everybody on Tinder. That's what happened.
Largely political marriages, but what was the result? The fracturing of the kingdom, the murder of so many of his children. Same thing with David. He winds up with. So he's married to Michal, Saul's second daughter, and then while he's running away from Saul, Saul gives Michal to another man, which is wrong. And then David marries 2 women, and then when he becomes king, I think he marries 2 more. So he winds up with like 5 wives at least, and then there's Bathsheba, so 6 maybe. And what's the result of that? Most of his sons wind up murdered. One of his daughters winds up raped by her brother. Half-brother, and it's absolute chaos. And living like the pagans results in that. If we look at the multiple marriages of Abraham, infighting between Isaac and Ishmael until the day of his death, and then the 2 finally reconcile. If we take a look at the children of Jacob, from 4 different women, constant infighting between them, and so much infighting between the mothers, and it's just madness. But at the deathbed of their father, they do finally reconcile. It's a huge mess.
How much?
For him?
Yeah.
I've been doing about over 5 ounces, just over like the next lineup.
Okay.
And remember, the heater, pull it out before it's done, otherwise it'll be too hot.
Yeah.
But God sees all marriage regardless of faith as...
It's still a marriage, so the sexual intercourse, that creates the marriage. So
I see.
The way Paul will talk about it, do you not know that any who have slept with a prostitute have become one with the prostitute? And how can the holy become one with that which is unholy? Don't join yourselves to prostitutes. So when we look at Jacob, God, as far as we can tell, God considers the marriage to Leah the legitimate marriage, even though legally Jacob could have put Leah aside because she's not the one that he had agreed to marry. He had every right legally, and maybe even in God's eyes, that's a stretch, to divorce her because it was marriage under false pretenses. And then he marries Rachel, and yeah, that's another legitimate marriage. It's not a plural marriage; it is two unique marriages, and it gets so messy. And then the maidservants come in, and those are also legitimate marriages, though they were called concubines. It's just madness. Just one and leave it there. And if she's of a different faith, I shouldn't have married her. But you're married now. And in the New Testament era, we are allowed that. In the Old Testament era, you go to, I think it's Nehemiah, he commands, or Ezra, one of the two of them, he commands the Israelites to put aside their foreign wives. Why? Because he's purging false gods, and the foreign wives bring their false gods with them. In the New Testament era, marriage is, and again, you're better listening to Dr. Mays talk about this than me, because he's done the preparatory work, but marriage to an unbeliever, you can still win that person over. Your presence with that person has a holifying effect as a Christian. That doesn't mean the unbeliever is ever going to convert, but it does mean that there's every single day of prayer, of scripture within the household that is of great benefit to the unbeliever. But as a Christian, don't marry an unbeliever. If you're unbelievers beforehand, don't divorce.
I was definitely the unbeliever in both my marriages. Both my ex-wives were definitely the second one. I was the unbeliever. So.
Okay.
So, and I'm not looking for confirmation bias here to, I genuinely just, because I'm not gonna lie, I am lonely. I do get very lonely. I would like a girl in my life, but I also want to make sure I do this right.
Yeah, and for the moment, you have been called to solitude. That is your vocation, which, like I said, allows you then more time for service of your neighbor, for helping those in need, for service of the church, for your own study of Scripture. Have you considered taking up Greek?
I tried on Duolingo, and I got maybe like 4 lessons in, and couldn't. So I switched to Japanese, which is somehow easier.
Well, for some people it would be,
yeah.
Which means you should probably take up Hebrew.
I tried that. I tried Arabic. I tried Latin.
And you couldn't get Latin?
I got maybe to like unit 4 or 5 in Duolingo, and then it started getting to all the different types of like us and and e and all that. I was like, okay, I need a teacher.
Okay. And Japanese is easier than Latin?
For some reason, it clicks.
Okay, weird.
Yeah, I can't tell you, but it clicks. I'm on day like 278 of my streak right now.
Wow.
So, yes, I have considered the ancient languages of antiquity, and
I'd love to know Japanese.
I tried learning that. I still have a book on how to read it.
Right.
At least how to read kanji, but as I told him, in college I took 3 years of Spanish, and I can tell you, hola.
He knows Spanish.
No Spanish.
Sorry. Well, we should move on from languages.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. For the sake of getting through more, we'll skip the readings at the end of this one. God forbid sexual sins such as rape, homosexuality, incest, sexual child abuse, obscenity, and the use of pornographic materials. For that, just go to Romans 1. He's very clear. About the only thing that you'll miss in the Romans 1 reading is that most English translation combine 2 words together to form homosexuality. It's actually, one of the words is speaking about homosexuality, and the other one is talking about effeminacy.
Effeminacy?
Yeah.
What's that?
That's where a man is acting more like a woman.
Yeah, an effeminate man.
Let me see if I've got the book anywhere on these shelves. This is one that I highly recommend to both of you. I've got a bunch of copies of them at the church, because eventually the Monday morning work crew Bible study is going to move to this book once we're done with Ecclesiastes. It is by Reverend Hemmer, and it's called Man Up. And I don't remember the subtitle. And because I'm not finding it, it means it's either in a place I cannot see or on a completely different bookshelf. But it's about being a Christian man. And in one of the chapters, he talks about this word that is untranslated, not translated correctly in Romans, and it's don't be the effeminate man, but man up. And it's acedia is the Greek word. Then God also forbids sexually impure thoughts and desires. For that we got Matthew 5:28 and 15:19. And this goes to Jesus' same warning that if you hate your brother in your heart, if you think evil thoughts of your brother, you have murdered him in your heart. Which means also that if you look on a woman and desire her, you have committed adultery with her. If you think those thoughts, the thought in God's eyes is the same as the deed. Which makes all of life far more difficult, and it becomes far more clear that we cannot keep God's law. Sorry, Vince, you're too hot. All right. Any questions before we move on to 7? Okay, these next ones, they should go pretty quickly. You shall not steal. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so we do not take our neighbor's money or goods, or get them in any dishonest way, but help him to improve and protect his possessions and income. So note that this is talking specifically about money or tradable goods, things like that. We'll get to the non-money, non-tradable goods with the future commandments. The 7th commandment is also an extremely versatile commandment because something that I like to do with our confirmation kids is pose them a story or pose them a event in the news and ask them which commandments are being broken here. And what they figured out is that the 7th commandment is almost always broken in some way or other. Just like the 1st commandment is always broken. The 2nd commandment, if a Christian is involved, is always broken. The 4th commandment is almost always broken. The 7th one is as well, because so many of these commandments also fall into the category of taking what does not belong to you. So at work, if you're lazy, what are you doing?
Stealing time.
Yeah.
You're stealing time. If you plant seeds in your backyard and great things grow up and you get just a huge harvest and you say, I did all of this, what are you doing?
Stealing glory.
Yeah, you're stealing the glory of God. You're breaking the 1st commandment, the 2nd commandment, because we're all Christians here, and you're breaking the 7th commandment by doing that. Stealing God's glory is a breaking of both of these commandments.
Right?
Yes?
We don't have any unsalted butter.
We should in the bottom of the door.
Oh no, I found it. Oh, you mean the big block?
Yes. That should be unsalted.
I would need help with that.
Alright, who wants to hold the baby?
I'll hold the baby.
Alright, Vincent. Don't scream. Alright, one of you read the next paragraph and that verse.
I know he's coming back.
Okay. In the 7th commandment, wait, are we at this one right here? The middle one?
Yes.
In the 7th commandment, God forbids every kind of robbery, theft, and dishonest way of getting goods. So flip to Ephesians.
I'm afraid I can't hear you, so insert appropriate commentary here.
Yeah.
Sorry, Internet. This is terrible, basically, podcasting.
4:28.
I have a mic, I just don't remember where it is.
Okay, so Ephesians 4:28. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need.
Okay, there you go. Welcome. So, I heard most of that one. That is a fascinating verse. You want me to take him back?
He's fine.
Okay. That is a fascinating verse because what's the reason for not stealing? Not just that it's wrong to steal, but what should the thief really be doing in this circumstance?
Giving.
Yeah. You work not only not to steal, but so that you may have something to give to someone else. Paul is framing the whole concept of labor not as providing for yourself, but actually as providing for someone else, which completely should change how we view the work of every man, every job, it's not actually for the sake, thank you for holding it, of providing bread for your own table, but work is more about providing for someone else. And then we have all these commands throughout the Bible of take care of the poor, the widow, the orphan. Our work is not just to feed ourselves. That is necessary. It's the starting point. But our work is to care for those who cannot, to care for those who temporarily don't have anything. So the seventh commandment is also then about proper work ethic and proper purpose even in work. All right, we need to turn some lights on. Okay, so the positive aspects. Assume we haven't read this yet. We should do everything we can to help our neighbor retain and build what is his. This commandment presumes that personal possessions are not evil in themselves. Consider also the promise of inherited land to the Israelites in the Old Testament, and in the book of Joshua in particular. But we already talked about that part of it. So the eighth commandment then. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray him, slander him, or hurt his reputation, but defend him, speak well of him, and explain everything in the kindest way. Now, Adam, what's your involvement in the LCMS online sphere?
I sometimes watch Brian Wolfmiller.
Good. You don't want to do any more than that.
Okay, that's about it.
Maybe picking up On the Line or Concord Matters or something like that would be good. But if it's just that, wonderful. Carter, stay away from the online sphere, because the online sphere is where the eighth commandment is violated every day. It's terrible. Maybe not as bad as some other Christian churches, but
I did hear before I left Maine that the church elders were talking about some kind of thing going on, some beef in the LCMS.
There's always one.
Is it? Okay.
I don't know what the current one is, but there's always something going on.
There's always a beef.
There was the annotated large catechism thing, which is an interesting story if you want to hear about it at some point, Carter. There's the presidency, there's the rebaptism controversy, which has not been solved yet as far as I've heard, and that is one that we should be complaining about, but correctly. In past attempts to close campus-based ministries and churches. Yeah, but that's years in the past now. One didn't happen, thank God, and the other one did happen. And then they bought the place and rebuilt it. And, oh well. But yet, when we hear of things, when we hear rumors about others, how should we automatically treat it? We should automatically treat it as gossip and assume it is false. If there's something genuinely bad happening, if somebody's in open sin and you hear about this, what is the appropriate thing to do? The appropriate thing is to go to the source and ask. Or, if you have no actual influence or relation to the problem, leave it be and assume it is a lie. Not, of course, assuming lie from the one who tells you, because that could also be breaking this one, but assuming that what he or she heard is also wrong. This to protect the reputation of your neighbor. Janelle, is his bottle ready?
I forgot about it, so you can pull it out.
Okay, that's it. You're just going to have to be patient.
I'm very sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So we have also commands by Paul, and this might not be the ones that I've got on here, where we are commanded to hide the sins of our neighbors so as to protect his reputation. Why does he do that? Because, why does he say that? The reason is that we may not know what's actually going on. So you see your neighbor being furtive with his phone. And you know him, and you know his wife, and you like them both, and you're like, oh no, he must be contacting somebody behind her back. Well, yeah, that may be what's going on, but you don't know. You can't see his phone, you can't see who he's texting. For all you know, this could be a surprise party for her. And that's the assumption that you should actually make. And so that's to protect his reputation. if you are genuinely concerned about a situation like that, what should you do? You should go to him and ask. All right.
So when I was telling you the other day about at church after Sunday service about my friend and all that, that's essentially what he's doing.
He's most definitely breaking the Eighth Commandment.
How can I rectify this with him?
Point him to that commandment.
He won't listen to me because I'm Lutheran and not Roman Catholic. So
then you go to the Roman Catholic Catechism, see what they say about the Eighth Commandment, and say, this is what your own book says.
Okay.
I don't think they say exactly the same thing. I haven't looked at that. But while a lot of Roman Catholic theologians have great admiration for the Small Catechism, I don't know how much of Luther's teaching is the same as what they taught. I would expect a lot of it is, because this is all this stuff about the Ten Commandments is very clear throughout the Bible, and it's not like the Roman Catholics are idiots. There are so many more intelligent men among the Roman Catholics, just because of the size of their church. All right, where did my paper go? What did you do with it? All right, here we go. Okay, we may not lie. Let's just do Ephesians 4:25. Has one of you got
I got 4 open already.
All right.
Therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another.
So there we go. Is there ever a right time to tell a lie? I'm getting a no.
If it can protect somebody.
That is often how people have argued, and that might be the right answer. Now, if we were talking in virtue ethics, go with what Immanuel Kant says, he'd say no. There's never ever a right time to tell a lie. But what about you got Jews in your basement, or Jews in your attic, Jews in your wall? You got Jews coming out your ears, and the Nazis, they come for the Jews. Is it right to say, I have no Jews anywhere in my house if they ask you? You'd be saving a life and preventing an evil. So there are times, the argument goes, where one commandment trumps another commandment. So what commandment are you keeping by protecting these Jews that are, again, coming out your ears? The Fifth Commandment. You are also keeping the Fourth Commandment by ignoring the ungodly commands of the father of the country. You're keeping the First Commandment by honoring God. You're keeping the Second Commandment by showing love to your neighbor as a Christian, and so the people who see your love see Christ in you. And if it happens on Sunday, of course, you're keeping the Seventh Commandment. That one's always fun. But is it also possible to tell the truth in such a situation and protect the endangered person? Hypothetically speaking, yes. Effectively, no. So back in the day when I was reading Kant on this, the thought occurred to me that in order to tell the truth, you'd have to be just extremely hyperbolic about it. The Nazi comes to your door in 1930s Germany, and you're like, oh, of course, I've got Jews here, there, everywhere. Obviously, I've got them here, and just make light of it. And the guy says, aha, okay. No need to be so rude, sir, and then moves on. Well, what's the Nazi actually going to do? He's not going to respond that way. He's going to, okay, well, then we'll search your house, and then you've killed a bunch of people. It's not always an easy answer when it comes to this one. But if it means keeping another commandment over keeping this one, yeah, maybe it is the godly thing to break it. Positive aspects. We should defend the reputation of our neighbor and the weak and destitute. We should always interpret what our neighbor says and does in the most positive manner. And we've already talked a lot about that, so we will move on. Unless there are further questions or comments.
My only question, and I've heard this before, and I want to say actually it was one of Pastor Wolfmiller's, I believe. That's why I shook my head a little bit, because it's by telling the truth, and this was the argument that I heard, by telling the truth, then his will is done. It may seem horrible in our eyes, but horrible things happen, and God knew all of this was going to happen. And that's kind of why I did that a little bit.
Yeah, that is a legitimate argument, and it is essentially true. You should never, of course, lie about yourself. You should never lie about your work. Not answer is another way of answering this. Is if somebody asks you something and lying would be harmful, because it's sinning, but telling the truth would also be harmful. Maybe say nothing, like plead the fifth, and that's all you can do. And ultimately, you will have to trust. That's an illegitimate opinion, Vincent. You'll ultimately have to trust what God says. How is the temperature of the milk?
I don't know, I cannot.
Alright, we're testing this out. Still too hot.
Yeah, I love it in there.
That's alright.
That timer doesn't.
It'll survive.
Timer doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it really doesn't help. Okay, 9th and 10th commandments. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not scheme to get our neighbor's inheritance or house, or get it in a way which only appears right, but help and be of service to him in keeping. So at last we come to property. This is no longer money that's being stolen, and this is not even us taking from him, but really just desiring it. So as I look at my house and the decrepit state that so much of it is in, I really do want to end. Well, you're seeing the nice room. I really do want something better, but it is wrong to look at my neighbor's house and say, Carter has such a better house than I do. I wish I had that. Because God hasn't given me your house. He's given me my house, as terrible as parts of it are. And just like he's given you your house, and he hasn't given you that mansion. He hasn't given me that house with like the 3 garages and 3 floors that I just kept popping up on Zillow when I was looking for houses down here. I didn't want that house. That was the easy one not to break the 9th commandment over. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant or maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So now we finally come to those things which have legs, or those things which have faces which your neighbor owns. God has given them to him and not to you. So what does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not entice or force away our neighbor's wife, workers, or animals, or turn them against him, but urge them to stay and do their duty. These commandments forbid desiring to get what does not belong to us. The 9th concerns not using the legal system dishonestly, and the 10th, not enticing away our neighbor's people or animals. So the 9th one really does concern using the legal system to get what isn't yours. So suing for things that don't belong to you, using some legal contrivance to get a hold of it, eminent domain, anyone. And then the 10th commandment concerns enticing, bribing, or tempting away someone, desiring to do that at least. Vincent, you're not being helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Come here.
Sorry, gentlemen. Yes. Dinner is having issues. Oh my goodness. This is chaos. Normally, Adam, it's chaos around here. We're not going to get into original sin. We're going to have to call it really soon. But we got 1 Timothy 6, 8 through 10 speaks about this. The positive aspect is that we should be content with what God has given us. For that we go to Luke 12, 15. But looking back through the whole of the 10 Commandments, something that we have going on is we actually have a widening spectrum of where things are concerned. We have, of course, the upward bar, the first table of the commandments, God, us, church, community. And then the second table, it follows a similar route, where we start with those nearest to us, our parents. Then we move on to what God has given to us, which is ours only, and that's the life, so that we may not take it. And then we move on to the next nearest thing to every person, and that's his spouse. And then from the spouse, we move on to my facing to the world around me. So we've gone from the innermost part of the house to our front door. So that's how people see me, or how people see anyone. And then from there, we go on to property. What's outside of the house, my job, my income, the income of others, more in the community. I got reputation in stealing backwards. They're both out there, though. But it's a widening field, and then finally with these 2 commandments, we transfer from our house to God's obligations for me, for my neighbor's house and everything that's in there. So that it's a broadening out the commands. They flow naturally from each other and fill the world in that way. All make sense? All right, then we're going to have to call it because I have to help with dinner. Is one of you willing to feed the baby?